Welcome to the In Search of More podcast. I am your host, Eli Nash. Join me weekly on my quest for more from myself and more from this world. We'll see you on the other side. All right. Welcome, Eliezer.
Good morning.
I'm sitting here with Eliezer Nerenberg, amongst other things, the co-founder of the Tikkun Healing Center.
Correct.
Guilty as charged.
Yes, that's me.
That's you. Okay, so let's jump right into very important questions. Are you a listener of the podcast?
Yes, I am. I watch it also occasionally while I'm driving when it's not too dangerous.
Right. What do you like about it?
I like how it's very authentic and real, how people share real stuff that's going on with them without trying to fluff it or put bells and whistles around it, because there's a lot of podcasts out there where I feel like there's some sort of, it's being controlled in a way to get a message out there versus people just talking from their heart. So I like your podcast because I feel like people are not trying to control the outcome, they're just speaking.
Right. Do you get the sense that if someone is on the podcast, when I'm having a conversation with them, I'm giving like a stamp of approval for their work or what they do, or is that an impression you get?
No, on the contrary, I like how I even was watching a podcast several episodes ago. You had a gentleman on that was talking about some workshops, and you actually went out of your way to mention this is not the only workshop. There are other ones out there. They're not better or worse. It's all for different type of people. So I feel like you're pretty good at just looking at the big picture and not trying to give your haskama in any way. You're just letting people share their stories and making it as an option, right?
Right. At times I have a personal challenge, which I'll bring it up, or a question, or I've had a nice experience, which I'll share. But I don't see it that way. I've just heard sometimes people say, how can you give this guy a platform? How can you say, not saying about you specifically, I'm saying like someone can view it in that way. And I say, I'm not saying they're good. I'm not just because I interviewed a therapist doesn't mean I think everyone should go to them. Doesn't mean I think anyone should go to them.
Yeah, and I think you have all different types of people on your podcast.
Yeah.
It hasn't been one type. You go from rabbis to clinicians to people doing sports therapy. Like I've seen it all. So
yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, and I should get people on both sides and just have a good conversation and put it out there.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. Okay, so hopefully we can do that. Any favorites come to mind?
I think a couple of them, but the Leah Rubashkin story really touched me, really hit home. And that was a good example of, like, if I referred somebody to watch your podcast, I'd tell them to watch that one.
Hit home?
I very much resonated with what she was talking about. I think several times throughout that podcast, it brought tears to my eyes. And also she spoke very authentically. You gave her the opportunity to be comfortable and share her story, and it came from a really good place. And that's what I love about your podcast. People can open up and become vulnerable like that, because it's not every day that you bump into people on the street and they start sharing their intimate details about who they are.
Right, they could be real. One of the early recovery, and I don't know if that's a part of your life or not, like the 12-step part of recovery, but early recovery for me, I was very impressed by that, to go to a room where people were honest. And my not so hidden agenda is to bring more of that to the world. There's just a space where you can speak openly, speak freely, be honest, not drop a few of the masks, not as if in 12-step meetings all the masks are dropped. Sometimes they give you an additional one, the 12-step mask. But by and large, people are able to be honest about their struggles in that space, and I found it enlivening in some way. And I thought, hey, wouldn't it be nice if more of the world had this?
I definitely know what you're referring to, because I've been in and out of those rooms over the years, so I've seen it from all sides. Fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it.
I think it's fortunate. Okay. Fortunate to anyone who who gets to learn the lessons of the 12 steps. I often repeat this quote from Chase Taub. He says that for many people, spirituality is a luxury. For the addict, spirituality is a necessity. Really, and he clarifies this is the continuation of his quote. He says, really, spirituality is a necessity for everyone. But for some people, it's deeply felt and very obvious that spirituality is a necessity for them. So those people are often found around the 12 steps, not the worst people to to hang around, not the worst name to have, not the worst moniker to have. So you said that there were elements of the podcast that hit home, which suggests the podcast with Layla Bashkin specifically, which suggests you saw yourself in her story.
I saw myself in her story, and at the time, I had just gotten back. I would say it was a few months removed from. I went on a 12-day master plant dieta in Peru in the jungle. I sat in isolation. I was doing some real soul searching, a real cheshbon nefesh for this audience. They could relate to that. And I came back with a lot of clarity and a lot of answers, with a lot of questions that I was, that I was looking for. But naturally, I think what happens to people is, as much of the truth that you see sometimes, and you have a real das, a real knowledge of it, your mind starts questioning it later on, saying, oh, did that really happen? Maybe it didn't. People start saying, oh, did that really happen to you? Even though you know...
Specifically to abuse.
Yeah, that's just one example, and that's something that I encountered over there, that I witnessed something that had come up from my past. But then I guess it's that voice in your mind, your logical mind, saying, did that really happen? How could that happen? How could somebody do something like that to such a young boy? Did I make it up? Did I fabricate the story in my mind? Was I looking for it? So you start to all these natural things come up. So when I heard her share her story, and she struggled with that same thing, it very much hit home. And I was very much like, it gave me like, okay, there's other people out there that have gone through this struggle, and they're questioning the same things because we're human. And it gave me like a little bit comfort to know that
the questioning is normal.
That the questioning is normal.
Of
course it's normal.
I would say that it's pretty much across the board. The questioning I've seen with, everyone I know, I can't think of anyone right now as I'm sitting here who doesn't fit one of these two categories. Either questioning whether it happened or whether it was really severe. Meaning if they know it happened and for whatever reason they're sure about that aspect of it, they'll question, was it really abuse? Was it really that bad? Or am I making a bigger deal out of it than it should be? There's some sort of confusion around it happening or the severity of it happening across the board.
Exactly.
It almost seems to be a component of it. A component of abuse. It's going to hurt someone in a number of ways, and one of those ways is to confuse them about their experience, the severity of it or the actuality of it.
Right. So I thought she really articulated really well, explaining all those aspects of it, and she reconciled all them together in a way that she believed in her faith, and I just thought it was really beautiful.
Beautiful. Okay, so let's dive into your story a little bit today. What you do in the world. You live here in?
Yes, South Florida.
South Florida. And what do you do in the world? Your vocation?
Well, I'm a father of 8 children, Kanai, so that should keep me busy enough, right?
Yeah.
So outside of that's my full-time job, and then everything else, I'm just trying to support them, right? What do? I have my main 9 to 5, which is a specialty finance business. That's, pays my bills. And then I have several things on the side, but my main passion is this line of work that I recently got into. We have
as a Tikkun Healing Center.
Tikkun Healing Center, and I got into it because I had a very strong nevuah, very strong intuition that told me that this is what I need to be doing, and I did it for myself and my own healing. That's where it started, and then we're just trying to share this with other people.
Understood. Okay, I do want to go down kind of a path of something you said earlier. You mentioned going down to Peru, master plan, dieta, etc. Can you explain that a little bit more? What is it practically? What are and what's the difference between that, because I've never done that, and doing 2 ayahuasca ceremonies back to back at the Tikkun Healing Center?
So do you want me to start there, or do you want me to first start before there, how I even got into this line of work? Or I could just first address that question, then I could backtrack. The reason I went to Peru is because I'm a father. I manage 2 businesses. I have 8 children. I have a wife. There's a lot going on naturally in life. And although ayahuasca changed my life and plant medicine really, really helped me when I was really, really struggling, I found that obviously we all talk about it, that the integration is a really huge aspect of it, right? And the word integration is used loosely. Everybody uses, oh, you need to have integration. Well, what does that really mean? What is integration, right? Is integration before? Is it preparation? Is it after? Going to a therapist twice a week? Is that integration? Like, what is, like, there's no real definition of what integration is. It's like a verb that's just used loosely. So, but I felt for myself that every time I would drink ayahuasca, I would have a profound impact on me. But then, I have to go back the next morning to work. I have to go deal with the family. I have to deal with all the struggles and stresses of everyday life. And I felt like I needed a little bit more. I needed a place where I can just turn off my phone, where I'm going to disconnect from the world, where if I do that for myself, the world will wait for me. But if I don't take care of myself, there is no world to come back to. So I was at a point where something kept coming up for me during my ceremonies, where I always knew growing up that there was 3 times I was abused. I was sexually molested, and I'm able to identify them. I know who they were. I know where it happened. And I've always felt like it
Different people.
3 separate, isolated incidents, and I'm able to talk about it. And I truly believe to my core that it didn't have any impact on me. Like, I'm able to talk about it. It hasn't affected me. Yes, I have all my bad habits, but they come from something else. It doesn't come from that. I know it. Like, I would understand if somebody was constantly abused by the same person, how it could have an impact. But because it was 3 separate occasions, I always told that to myself. And therapists over the years have always corrected me, saying, Eliezer, I believe you that you don't feel like it's impacted you, but it absolutely has. And it's something you should look into. And I was always open to that possibility of looking into it. I did a couple ayahuasca ceremonies, and I walked out feeling like something really bad happened to me. There was one in particular, I walked out with this disgusting feeling that I felt like I was raped, and I couldn't quite understand it. And I thought I was tapping into an energy in somebody else in the room. And I went to that person afterwards, said, can I ask you a question? Were you raped? They said, no, absolutely not. And then I realized, I'm like, you know what? Maybe it was me. And then from that moment on, I was scared really bad to drink ayahuasca again, because I knew that there was this fear that I had to face, and I wasn't quite ready to face it. And it's funny enough, the first time I even ever drank ayahuasca, I saw somebody in my family being raped, and I didn't know who it was, and I was really scared to see who it was, so I ran away from that fear. I didn't confront it. And there was just this ongoing thing that kept coming up, like something more happened. There was more to the story than you think, Eliezer. It wasn't just the 3 times. Something else happened that maybe predated all that maybe in such a deep, sort of harmful way that you buried it so deep that maybe you just identify with those other. It's like you have to hold on to something, so I'm holding on to those 3. So I went up to New York.
Can you explain that?
Where sometimes we gravitate to something that we can hold on to. So I was able to hold on to...
As a way to avoid the real thing.
Yeah, as a way to avoid the real thing. And I tell myself, oh, like nothing, this is okay, this is what happened, because maybe when you find out to what really happened to me, those other incidents were almost nothing. It was nothing in comparison to the truth.
Okay, I feel like you just dropped a bomb, which I have to let sit, but I won't do it here. But that's a very interesting... To sit with something, to sit with the memory of something negative that happened to someone, identify with it, be able to talk about it, and use that as a way to avoid something much larger.
Yeah. So in looking back in hindsight, I think that's what I was doing over the years. Okay. So I was in New York in a ceremony. I wanted to try somebody else. I couldn't get there. Felt like something bad happened to me. Then I was over here in my facility. Again, I walked away with this horrible feeling. I couldn't pinpoint it. And I told my wife, I told my therapist, we went to a couple of counseling. I told my therapist, I feel like I was raped. Can't identify it. And over the years, I always felt like there's something deep inside that happened to me with everything I went through during childhood, that something else happened that I don't know why. For some reason, when I watch movies, whenever there's anything happen with children, I start to cry. If people don't treat children right, it hurts me to the core. And I'm always super sensitive when it comes to children. And I felt like something happened to me. I don't know what. So I started to, again, my old habits and patterns and behaviors and struggles started to come up. And I'm like, I recognize that I need to do something and I need to search for more. No pun intended. I had to search for more. So one of my partners, his name is Alex. Serves medicine at my place. I know that for his own healing, he goes to Peru, which is the authentic place of the Shipibo tribes, where this all comes from. So I like the idea of being in isolation, because every time the next morning I have to turn on my phone, get distracted, and it's a distraction. Life's a distraction. Yeah. I feel like I need to go somewhere in a quiet place, turn my phone off, be in the wilderness, just journal. I wrote 50 pages when I was there. So to explain to you what a master plant dieta is, that when people go away to Peru, they're drinking ayahuasca every other night. So the 36 hours in between, you're in isolation in your hut, where they discourage talking to other people. Everybody has their own hut. They bring you food twice a day, no spices, no anything in it. It's just very raw, vegetable, maybe some
For how
rice
long?
and beans for the entire time you're there. So your body is a real keli. It's a
But
real...
so in your case, you said how?
So there are different ones. You could do 7 days, 10, 12, 14, 21.
Got
I
it,
did
okay.
14 days.
Got it. Understood.
Okay, so in the 14 days, I'm drinking ayahuasca every other night. But the big thing about a master plant dieta is you're dieting another plant. It's a natural plant. I dieted ahosacho.
Besides for that plant, they're feeding you your meals.
Yeah, they're feeding
in
you
general,
your
which are
meals.
all natural.
All natural. There's no spices. There's nothing cooked. It's all 100% like vegan. It's plant-based, occasional vegetable. If you ever want any protein, every other day they'll give you one hard-boiled egg just to get some protein in your system. But outside of that, there's no meat, no fish, no nothing. It's like raw plantains, raw bananas, raw like rice with no spices in it, just boiled rice. That's
And
it.
what are you doing most of the day?
You're in isolation and you're thinking and you're journaling
Literally
and you're
isolation.
davening. Yeah, no books. They don't want you to have any books because books are a distraction. I was able to have my siddur, a chumash, and my tehillim, and that is it. I davened, I prayed, I journaled. You take for walks in the jungle, and I understand why. Because this plant that you're dieting, it's non-psychoactive plant. It's a natural plant, and you have to be very quiet to hear the messages that it gives you. You have to be super quiet and still and no distractions. And if you are, the plants
How often are you
speak
taking
to
that
you.
plant? What did you say the name of the plant was?
There's many different plants you can diet. Mine was ahosacho.
Got
And
it.
because the head maestro will meet with you and they will, based on their intuitive feeling and based on your history of, I told them I talked about sex abuse and substance abuse and all this stuff, they will recommend a plant that they feel energetically that's going to help you.
Got it. So this plant is not psychoactive,
No, not
but it
psychoactive,
also
totally
has
legal.
an intelligence that's...
Yes, and the big
can-
question in the jungle is, does the ahosacho assist the ayahuasca or does the ayahuasca assist the ahosacho? And my conclusion was that the ayahuasca assists the ahosacho. The ahosacho is a plant that's just sending us messages, but it's intensifying the messages because you're drinking ayahuasca every other day and you have to be super quiet. Like I dream, like I would wake up from a dream and write 3 pages, and in your dreams it's sending you messages. You're walking around during the day and you're getting messages.
How often are you taking
The plant you're drinking twice a day for every day. It's just like a brewed tea. You drink it down. Mine tasted like garlic water. Twice a day I drink it.
Understood. When you say in isolation, what about during the ceremonies itself? That's
So
isolation too?
no. So then you're with however many people are there during that time. That's the only time you really have any human interaction, because when they call it a diet, it's not just a diet for food. It's a diet for the things you put on your body. They want you to use a natural toothpaste, a natural deodorant. Anything with chemicals is counteractive to the ayahuasca. Ayahuasca doesn't like anything not natural. And it's hitting your system and your body much more, the more natural you are. So some people there, they're real jungle people, don't even brush their teeth for 2 weeks. So you don't have to take it to that level, just use a natural toothpaste. So when you talk to somebody, it's the same thing. You're picking up on their energy, and their energy is coming into you, and it could mess up your messages. So if you want to be total, it's like the Baal Shem Tov. These people used to go out into the field. I'm not trying to compare, but they used to sit and do hisbonenus. And Cheshbon and Nefesh, the Ari, was in isolation for several years before he became the Ari. The Rashbi sat for 13 years. He's got this. There's a logic to that. It's brought down in the Zohar, like with sitting, not talking, not communicating. He used to not even talk to his wife when he came home. the Ari did that during the years that he was like in Egypt, I think.
Was that a benefit or a cost?
I don't know. I guess he was the Ari, so we don't take any.
Right.
He was on a different level.
Got it. Fascinating. The reason why I'm asking, I'll tell you why. So someone called me yesterday asking me, do I think they should go down to Peru to do, I don't know if it was Peru, but somewhere to do a dieta. I'm like, I don't know why you're asking me. You can ask anyone. Is this a rabbinical question you're asking? Like, what is the context of
Could be a
of the
rabbinical question as well. Yeah.
I said, if like as a rabbi, I'm not like,
Right.
don't ask me as from that standpoint, but what is the reason you're asking? You're asking me, or what are your concerns? So when I heard what was going on, and obviously it's someone who's done medicine before and had different opportunities to do medicine, I said to them, it sounds appropriate. It sounds appropriate, but you're asking me. So my hope is that over the course, I said, when do you have to make a decision? They said in the next month. The next month is to go, so hopefully they make a decision right away. So I said, I hope that over the course of the next little bit, maybe sooner than later, that one of us get a sign of whether it is or isn't appropriate. So I'm taking this as the sign to communicate to them that the dieta offers something that a couple ayahuasca experiences won't. That was what I wasn't able to answer. I said, I don't have experience with the dieta. So you ask me about something, does it make sense to go out there to the jungle to
But they have to do
something?
it right because you are your own boss. Like, it's not a jail. They discourage the use of phones. Some places actually take away your phone. The place I went discourages it, but I knew I was going for a reason. I wasn't going to go halfway across the world and not having it pot. So I knew I turned in my phone. I followed the rules. I didn't talk to anybody. So it's really up to you how much you get out of it. So I would just give anybody advice, if that's what they're looking for, to do it right.
Right. Yeah, this is the kind of person who would. They're from, and, I think some of the question was coming from that, but I didn't have the personal experience. Normally I just speak from personal experience, so I can say, yes, this is different than that for a reason. If someone says, I've done mushrooms, is there some benefit to doing ayahuasca? I'm uncomfortable with ceremonies. I can speak to the difference between those two. This I didn't have, but they kept coming. I was being asked a few times by them.
I think it's also important to, again, that's what I'm saying. If they're asking the rabbi, it might be a different answer.
There's a reason they're not asking a rabbi. Not because they don't want the rabbi's answer, but they don't trust the rabbi's experience.
Right, but they don't, understood. Because the reason I don't know if it's appropriate to even mention this now, but the reason is, and I was very sensitive to this when we started what we're doing, is you need to be careful with the Avodah Zarah aspect of it. And when it comes to Avodah Zarah, even if it's in the lineage in the family, and some of these maestros, if their grandfather or father practiced Hinduism, not that there's anything wrong with Hinduism, but it could be contrary to our belief system, and you have to be careful who you sit with. So I did extensive research before I went to the place. Like, I interviewed several places. And again, I'm not going to get into the whole rabbinical.
What do you mean not that there's anything wrong with Hinduism? Judaism believes that there is something wrong with Hinduism.
I'm saying it's a religion. Judaism also believes you should be part of a religion. So if you're not Jewish, you want to be part of Hinduism, then that's great, right?
Not necessarily. So I think according to Judaism, I think that everyone is meant not to serve idolatry. It's something for 100% of the world, right? Isn't part of the 7 Noahide laws?
Right.
One of them is not to serve.
Right.
So, in as much as Hinduism does, I think that Judaism does have a problem with.
Right. Okay. So maybe
Hinduism.
that was a bad example, but you know what I mean.
Okay, but
that's a whole separate conversation.
Yeah, different conversation.
We could talk 2 hours.
Right.
About
Say
that.
not there's anything wrong with Hindus. Right.
Right.
Of course,
No, but
maybe
I'm saying somebody
people,
should do due diligence on where they're going to go and sit with. You have to be careful, because they could bring in their external belief system into the room, and that could be
so how do you know
problematic.
that? How does one do that research? How did you do that research?
So, first of all, you're talking about going to Peru, or what I'm doing over here? Because what
Let's
I'm doing
talk
over
about-
here, so the
Let's
reason
talk about Peru, and then we'll go to here because
well, the
here's
reason I even knew about it over here is because I consulted with a couple of very big rabbanim in the New York area that deal with this before we even start our facility. I know it's a little taboo in the community, and people always want to know, oh, how's that not Avodah Zarah? So I met with my local Rav over here, and he told me that when he gets a medical question, he'll send you to a doctor. He said he knows nothing about this. He told me where I need to be careful, but go speak to Rav. So I did a lot of research. I found a very big, well-known Satmar Rav that only talks Yiddish and Hebrew up in Monsey, New York, very well known. I'm not going to mention his name because he said specifically, he's not giving me haskama, but he's dealt with this over the years, and he checked our processes, and he told me where I need to be careful, where I shouldn't be careful. He said just going to some random maestro in Peru could be problematic, but he told me what to look for.
So what's to look for? Let's talk.
Really, that you want to sit with somebody that believes in one God. That's really the main thing. He doesn't have to be Jewish, but he's got to have the belief system that he believes in one Eibishter. And that could come in many different forms, and that's okay. But the belief system has got to be that he believes in one God. If you start looking as the medicine as the healer itself, that's problematic. The medicine is a shliach. It's a tool that we have, like Hashem gave us any medicine to help us, but Hashem is the ultimate healer, right? And just recognizing that. And some people put too much emphasis into the medicine as the one that's doing the cure. No.
Well, there are many who believe in one God as the creator, but they also believe in the power of the plant itself,
And that's okay.
so to speak.
Yeah, that's
I guess what the Hebrew term for that might be something like shittuf, like a partnership,
Right,
a partnership of sorts.
but it's a gift that Hashem gave us to use. And if you use it in the right way, it could be very
Right. My understanding in Judaism, the way it's viewed, the terminology that's often used for the concept of Avodah Zarah is kagarzem biyad ha'chaytzev, right? That all these things are like an axe in the hand of a wood chopper. Essentially, that none of these tools, as powerful as they are, have any choice in the matter. That's something unique about humans, that humans are given choice. We're made in God's image, but plants are not. Plants don't have choice in the matter. So as powerful as they are, whether it's stars or astrological system or things like that, they do certainly have a lot of power. And God, according to Judaism, sends a lot of energy, current, or whatever it is through these systems. Nevertheless, they're not meant to be worshipped because they don't have choice. So there's nothing to pray to.
right.
But some of these tribes believe in one God, but they also believe in the kind of agents.
Yeah, but I would say
some agency of the plants.
This is where I would say, like, that's why I didn't ask a rabbi if it's okay. I knew down to the core what I was struggling with, that I needed to go, and I knew that it's for me to, as long as they believe in what Eibishter, if they want to put too much hocus pocus in the plant, that's okay. That's them. That's not what I'm doing there. I'm there for my own self.
Right.
As long as they're not bringing any other gods into the room, then me personally, I'm okay with that. That's,
Right,
I
what
think
I've
it's a
heard
personal decision.
Right. What I've heard is that according to Judaism, that's okay. Meaning so Judaism believes that the whole world needs to have the 7 Noahide laws, right? Keep the 7 Noahide laws. But a non-Jew who believes in this concept of shittuf, of a partnership between God and other plants, like that's okay for them to believe. It's not the Jewish way, but it's recognized as okay for non-Jews. So I wonder if that's
Right.
okay.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you're saying there was a certain level of diligence you did, but then at some point in time, I'm going to get comfortable with it. They believe in one creator, exactly. The way that I want to, and that's a question that you asked them specifically. I mean, you called the maestro.
No, I did. I interviewed 4 different places. There was other questions as well, more chitzonius questions about hospitality and stuff like that. You know, which jungle is better? You know, but no. My main premise of my questioning was, and I narrowed it down to 2 places, and then I chose one.
Understood. And okay. Got it. Okay, fine. Yeah, no, it's an interesting topic as you go into this, because some think that those who are engaging in it are doing it willy-nilly. Oh, they don't care about all these concepts. But no, there's the balance of it too. That's why it's sometimes hard to ask a rabbi. And this person I was speaking to the other day, we discussed that, is that they don't understand what you're talking about. Meaning they don't understand the benefit, the potential massive benefit that you're receiving, and why you would even engage in.
So I think the right
exploration.
rabbi will understand. Like the rabbi I went to, I think understood this was out of his league, but he was smart enough to tell me where I should be careful. But he ultimately said, speak to a rabbi that deals with this. And I did, and I researched it. I found there are rabbis that deal with this. There's somebody in Monsey, New York, a big Satmar Rav. He's been doing this since 1970. He's had a lot of his Chassidim pass through. And he said to me, he's like, how could I not look at this when this is saving people's lives? He told me that himself.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And that's that sensitivity that's needed, which often, unfortunately, comes through experience. You know, once someone is faced with their own challenges or one of their children's challenge, and they're not just going to write something off. Oh, it's a desire, it's problematic. Well, this isn't a cookie on the shelf. It's not no difference whether you take it or not. This can transform someone's life in very, very positive ways, and avoiding it can, continue a very destructive path. What about JC, Jesus? He's mentioned all over the jungle and all through ayahuasca. There's a lot of, he's pretty famous.
But that's why I chose where I went to. I didn't hear it spoken about outside of one participant, but that was their own thing. But from the people that are serving, that's that's why I was sensitive.
Was that one of your questions? Was that part of your?
Yes, it was one of my questions. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I just want to make sure, because again, you can go to places, and nothing against them, but it's very much a part of it. So we just have to be careful. I think we have to be a little bit more sensitive, being Jewish people, like who we're going to be served by.
Got it. And you find that when you have conversations with maestros or others around this topic, they're sensitive to it.
Yeah, absolutely, because they've done a lot of work on themselves. So anybody that's going to be not sensitive to it, then that's not the right person, because they have to be open to other religions and your way of thinking. And everybody that I spoke to was super sensitive to it and respectful as well. Even if it didn't in line with what I was looking for, I didn't get any like, well, what a stupid question. None of that. These are all people that have been, this is their life mission. They feel like they're shluchim in this world to bring healing to the people. So it doesn't matter whether you're black, white, Chinese, Jewish, not Jewish. You're a human being with a neshama. And that's really like, that's what this is all about. So that's why we have to be careful, because they have good intentions. Their intentions are good. It's just, us being from Yidden, we have to follow the Torah way. And it's very specific about avodah zarah. You can't even go to somebody where it's in their family. It's very specific.
What does that mean? Can't you go to someone?
You can't even engage with somebody if there is avodah zarah in their lineage. That could be a problem, right?
Engage in what way?
Like if let's say I have somebody serving me medicine and he believes in one God, but his grandfather,
no, okay, you use the word engage. Engage could be.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Engage. No, just
it could be in a business transaction.
In this type of modality.
Got it.
Right.
Okay, to be served and to be
exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so now bring it back to Tikkun and how you, because when you're going to the jungle, that's something personal for you. You may be comfortable with something you.
Yeah, and I only did that 2 years after I was already in the medicine world.
Right, but what I'm saying is that's your personal decision of what you're comfortable with. Those are decisions you're making when you're going to Peru. But when you're doing something at Tikkun, you're thinking about, okay, how am I bringing something that's you're catering to the Jewish community?
So I'll share with you how I got into Tikkun. I know you were talking about the 12 steps and recovery and all that. So I myself over the years have struggled on and off over the years. Okay, and we'll come back later to what I discovered in Peru. But the point is that I struggled over the years. I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, the oldest of 10. I didn't grow up in the easiest situations. My parents didn't have any money. They did the best.
You grew up Chabad or what?
I grew up, a typical Baal Tshuva, poor Chabad family, My parents were doing the right thing, having children, because that's what Hashem wants. And they had a bunch of children, and Kanai Lahara, beautiful family. I'm the oldest of 10, but it wasn't easy for me growing up, being the oldest of 10 in those conditions. And my family really struggled with money over the years, and it was a difficult upbringing. And it was more like old school, like back in the day, the families, the way they raise their children is a little bit different than...
Can we talk about oldest children for a second? I feel like I'm going on a lot of different tangents.
Oldest children? Yes.
Oldest children, meaning you said the oldest of 10. That it sounded like you were saying that there's something specific about.
Well, I don't know where if it comes
from.
So
I'm not an oldest child, but if you can share some of the challenges of being an oldest child.
I think it comes from somewhere. I don't know if it's a Gemara or Yerushalmi or a Babli. It comes from somewhere. Somebody showed me at one point that there's just like there's kibbud of aim, that there's honor that you're supposed to give to the oldest sibling, and that's because the parents learned on you, right? If you're the oldest child, the parents learned their mistakes through you. So naturally, I think there's a certain responsibility that it comes with, being the oldest child, and there's certain, I don't want to call it abuse, but we're learning from our parents' mistakes on us. Nothing
You're the
against
guinea
them.
pig.
They did the best that they could.
Right, but practically...
But they had to practice on me.
Practically the oldest is the guinea pig.
So like that's why they say by the time they get to the youngest, they usually have the most freedom and they're, they have the easiest time. So it wasn't easy for me growing up, and I felt a certain responsibility for my siblings to keep everything in order.
But I think it says any older brother, like Achicha Hagadol about...
Oh, so you know the saying.
Yeah, but I think it's any older child.
Okay.
But it's the same... Like older brother, there's something about respecting your older brother. But I don't know if it's the oldest, but I guess... Okay, fine, the concept.
I think there's a certain responsibility that comes, or an oldest child puts.
Yeah, parents don't get perfect by their second child, right? There, each one is a guinea pig. Just the first guinea pig, right? Ends up with a few more.
But
scars.
I think there's also a certain responsibility that being the oldest child comes with, where you almost feel like a little bit of the parent yourself. So it comes with a lot of baggage that comes with. So over the years, I've, like any teenager, I experimented with different things, different escape methods.
Does that mean drugs?
Yeah, drugs, alcohol, you name it. I've been there, done that. And, over the years, and I'm right now, so I'm in my second marriage right now. I was married when I was 24 years old. I was married for 8 years. I have 3 teenagers, ages 21, 20, 18. Then I was single for 8 years, and I got remarried to my beautiful wife, Talia. We got married 6 years ago. We had 4 babies within 5 years. So I have 4 little ones, and she has a son, Yecheskel. So, and he's 21 years old, turning 22. So I have 8 children, and I would say that anytime life gets a little stressful, I was finding myself reverting back to old habits and patterns and behaviors that I thought were in my past.
Understood.
So I thought they were behind me, and I would dabble with, I'll just share this over here because people are very vulnerable on your podcast, but, I struggled on and off with cocaine. I was never a daily user. It was never like that, but it was always more like I would do it on a weekend, come out of it, I'll hate this, it's never going to happen again. I swear to God, this is not me. It's not who I am. I'll hate Hashem. I'm sorry. Swear it's never going to happen again. Happens 2 weeks later. Again, this went on for years, literally years, or then sometimes I'll stop for 6 months, swear it's never going to happen again. Then I find myself back in a strip club doing things like that. And, and once I got remarried, so I was single for 8 years. So obviously I was a single boy for a while, and, and I've struggled on and off over the years with all this stuff. And sometimes I'd get control over it and I'd be fine, but then somehow it would always come back somehow. Yes. And then I tried the rooms and of Alcoholics Anonymous and NA and SA. I tried it all. You name it, I tried it all. And for some reason, it just never resonated for me. And I'm not speaking anything against it. That program saves millions of people's lives, and I love it, and it's amazing, and I have not an ill thing to say about it, but for some reason, for me, it just never stuck. And I had a good friend of mine. So fast forward. So then I get remarried. My business took off during COVID. I did something. I found an angle in finance with COVID. I was financing COVID tests. And long story short, at one point we were sending out 40 pallets a day. And for 2 years, I did really well. I had everything I wanted. I bought a house in Miami Beach. Money wasn't an issue. Beautiful wife, children, everything I wanted. And then all of a sudden, things slow down. I get bored again. And then old patterns come back. And I finally, I think for the first time in my life, took responsibility. Because in the past, it was always something to blame it on. I was not in a great marriage, or I had money problems, I had this problem, that problem. I think for the first time in my life, I recognized it was an Eliezer problem. It wasn't anybody else's problem, because there's no excuses anymore, okay? In the past, maybe, yes, I think people, because of circumstances, will go to use, but the circumstances aren't an excuse, right? I always viewed them as an excuse. So finally, for the first time...
But there are many other people in that same circumstance who are not engaging in that same behavior.
Exactly. So there's absolutely no excuse for it. And I finally recognized I have everything I want. And it's for me to flush it down the toilet. I mean, you could build a building. It could take 5 years, but you can destroy it in one day. I literally saw how people destroy their lives with this tuma, with this stuff. And every time I would do it, because I knew I had a supportive wife and I was able to be honest with her, and because she supported me, they're only going to support you so much. The guilt and shame it would come with after I would mess up. And I didn't want to talk to anybody. I just wanted to lock myself in a room. And I'm generally a productive, high energy, could accomplish type of person. But when I put that stuff in my system and it takes me down, I literally for a week just disappear. I just become not myself, and which is part of the Yetzer Hara, by the way. It just brings you down. So I knew I needed to do something, and I tried it all. You name it, I've done it. It just, for some reason, I don't know what was happening with me, why it didn't stick. So I have a very good friend of mine. His name is Moshe Goldstein, very close friend of mine. I've always looked up to him in the world of recovery because,
it stuck.
I viewed for him he wore the AA underwear. He was that guy that always worked. He's always, and he had it figured out. And I always admired him for it, that he really had this whole recovery game figured out. And for some reason, maybe at times I was telling myself, maybe I need to be using every day, and maybe because I'm not using every day, but it's all the same. It doesn't matter. It's I'm not saying I'm better or worse. It just, for some reason, it just wasn't working.
I didn't understand the thought. Would you need to be using every day?
I thought maybe the reason why recovery works for some people is because they're using every day, but by me, it's only once a week or every 2 weeks, and maybe that's why.
Your problem wasn't big enough for...
Yeah, I don't know. I was just rationalizing my mind. Why is it not working? Bottom line, it just wasn't working for me. So I was searching. For something that worked. And I'm a big believer in Hashgacha Pratis and doing the right thing. And I know that when I'm in the right mindset and I'm doing the right thing and I'm davening and I'm learning and I'm putting one foot forward, I'm a very intuitive person and things come to me. But when I put that crap in my system and I'm not that person, then I get no answers. I have no intuition. It's I'm a different person. So it's a constant struggle.
Well, that is the reason to to use alcohol and drugs and these things is to numb ourselves.
Right.
When we numb, we're numbing.
Exactly. Everything that's going on around us.
Yeah.
So
That's my reason. That was my reason to get sober, because I didn't want to live numb anymore.
right.
I say sometimes I would go and sit down, let's say, interview someone for work. And typically when I sit down with someone, the main question I ask myself is how I feel after meeting them. But if I was in a strip club the night before or watched a ton of porn, then I'm not getting anything. I have no feeling before, during, or after. All I have is information, and information is not
Right.
is not the greatest place to make decisions from. It's much more useful to get those subtle,
Yeah, exactly.
communications.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, definitely.
the problem is that sometimes those subtle communications are communicating pain. And there's a lot of alarm bells in our life, and we have to change this, and we have to change that.
Yeah,
and
so I
someone's mistreating
recognize I
us,
was
and we're
always
not setting
living with a lot
boundaries.
of pain, and I'm
Yeah,
always
so we
numbing.
shut down the intuition.
Yeah,
Anyway.
exactly. So I was going through another tough time, but I had put myself together, and I was doing the right thing again for several weeks, and my intuition started coming back. But the funny thing is that a lot of times when I would be doing really well, it's almost like I self-sabotage myself and go out and use and do something just to like I'm not good enough to do well. Like there's a voice in my mind that's like, you think you're doing so good, I'm going to show you not, right? And you bring yourself down again, and you have to start over. It's like getting tiring. It's a constant like.
Yeah, they talk about it in recovery.
Yeah.
Right? You celebrate a bad. You cope with a bad day by acting out or taking your drug. You celebrate a good day by acting out or taking your drug.
Right, exactly.
Because ultimately, what we're looking for is a baseline feeling. The example I give is, it's kind of temperature. If it gets too hot, you lower the temperature. If it gets too cold, you raise the
exactly.
temperature. So where we're comfortable is at a certain range between 72 and 74 degrees. And some people were very particular. Like we need it to be 72.3, we need it to be exact. And anything less and anything more needs to be regulated back to 72.3. It's exactly where we feel comfortable. So the concept is unfortunately difficult for the addictive mind.
I was in one of those good moments for a few weeks, and I was approached by Maishi Goldstein's uncle in Surfside. He called me up. I guess he knew I had a good run with COVID, and he told me because of COVID, we usually send 75 kids to camp every single year from, living in Miami. And when somebody comes from a dysfunctional family, he said it's imperative that they get out of the house in the summer to go to camp, because it's totally abusive for them to stay home. It doesn't help the parents. It doesn't help the kid. We like sending these kids to camp every single year, and it's a relief for them, because even if they're, at least during the year, they're in school from 9 to 5, but for them to come home and be home in the summer and just living in that. And that really spoke to me and touched me. And he said, Eliezer, will you sponsor a couple kids? I said, yes, absolutely. And I said to him, I still remember the story. I said to him, just please make sure that they have money for the canteen. He said, what are you talking about? He said, why? I said, because the one time in my life I went to camp when I was younger, to a sleepaway camp, was on a Ganyasol, New York. I was 11 years old. I went on a tzedakah organization that sent me to camp. And I was that kid that sat on the sideline that I was jealous of all the kids with their milk munches and their nugget rolls. And Erev Shabbos, they would all load up the canteen. I guess the organization forgot to give money for the canteen. And I was very embarrassed about it and ashamed about it. I said, because people don't always realize that when they're doing a mitzvah, they think it's the big part of the mitzvah, give money, but sometimes it's the details that matter. So I said, please make sure, because otherwise, they're just going to feel ashamed. Make sure the kids have money for the canteen. And he even said to me, he's like, I'm going to send you a case of milk munch and nugget roll to get over your trauma. I said, no, it's not necessary. Just make
Don't
sure
get over the
money.
trauma. Help more people.
The reason I'm sharing that story is I felt like, because I did something good, and I just didn't think about it, I did something good, that Hashem sent me the biggest gift that I ever received in the last few years at that moment. Maishi's uncle said to me, he said, are you still struggling? Because I've reached out to him in the past, because we had the similar struggles in the past, and he's a guy that, I looked up
Maishi's
to.
uncle, does this guy have a name, or you don't want to say it?
His name is Baruch.
Okay.
Okay, from Surfside.
Baruch D. Okay, good.
Yeah. I asked him, and he said, did you ever try medicine journeys? I go, what is that? He goes, call Maishi. I go, Maishi's the AA underwear guy. And, the philosophy in AA, don't put anything in your system. And I understand that if something works for you.
We've had some people grace this very couch. With
Exactly.
This
so if something works for you, then why change it up? I get it. I'm not disagreeing with it, but Maishi in my mind was that guy, the AA underwear guy. Why wouldn't Maishi put anything? Maishi hasn't had a drink of alcohol, even though he was never an alcoholic in 15 years because of that same concept, right? So, but I felt like Hashem was sending me a message. I felt like I did a good deed and the world is speaking back to me because of my good deed. So I called up Maishi. I said, Maishi, what's this all about? I said, Maishi, tell me what this is about. Because I heard about ayahuasca in the past, but I always heard about it from the guy looking for the next party. I have a good friend. He was in Burning Man. Then he's in Burning Man, South Africa. And now he's telling me about ayahuasca. And he's like, no, Eliezer, it's different. But I didn't hear it because he's like, no, it's more about self-searching. I didn't hear it because you hear about this stuff all the time. So it never resonated with me. But when Maishi told me about it, it resonated. I said, Maishi, what is this about? And he said, there's no way to explain it other than it's medicine from Hashem. And when he said that to me, it spoke to my soul. It spoke to my neshama. I said, I have to do that. I have to do that. And then I went out and I did it, and I can't even put into words what a profound impact it had on me. And it completely shifted everything within and getting me to look at things from a different light and a different way. But I took it really serious. I prepared for it. I dieted it. I tell this to everybody. It's not lahavdil that I'm going to compare, but if you're going to go to the Yechidus with the Rebbe, you're going to go to the mikveh, you're going to daven, you're going to learn, you're going to gear yourself up. The more you put into it, the more you're going to get out. So I really put a lot into it,
Well, I use the same analogy. I said it might be inappropriate, but the only metaphor I have from my background or anything else other than ayahuasca that sounds similar to drinking ayahuasca is yichidus. Even though I've never done yichidus.
Exactly. And you're going to prepare, and the more you put into it, if it's like walking to therapy. If you say this is stupid, it's not going to work, it's not going to work. I put a lot into it, and it kicked me in the rear like you have no idea. And it was very, very painful. Like, people say, well, why do you want to go through that again? Like, what is it? Is it a drug? Is it addictive? I'm like, no, you want to run away from it. I remember the first time it hit me, I was like, what type of sadistic friend tells their friend to do this? Maishi, you crazy? But it had a very, very profound impact. Super fun. Like, I have crazy stories on it. Like, I named one of my sons because I had a nevuah. I talked to a neshama. Like, it's just crazy. Like, and I think because I'm naturally intuitive, this stuff comes to me. But there was one ayahuasca ceremony in my third lesson. I'm sitting in Alex's backyard. I'm with Maishi, and it hit me, and it showed me, and it said, Eliezer, you need to don't be selfish over this gift that you've been given, and you see how this helps yourself. It can help other people. You need to approach Maishi and Alex and formalize this take it out of his backyard and formalize it into a proper setting. And it said to me, do it for the right reasons. Don't make it about the money. If you do it for the right reasons, it'll be extremely hatzlacha. And if you make it about the money, it's not going to work. Do it about the healing and about spreading Tikkun Olam, which is where we got Tikkun Healing Center. And I approached Alex because he was running a nice thing, but it was in his backyard. He had no way to grow. I said, Maishi, you have experience in addiction world. You've managed, treatment centers. You deal in operations. I said, let's do something together. And I approached them. I said, I'll finance it, and let's buy a property and bring this to people. And they all agreed. And 2 years later, here we are.
Beautiful. When did Tikkun open up? About a year ago.
About a year and a half ago. But 6 months prior to, we had to find the property. It was a big project. And we're still not exactly where we want to be, but slowly, baby steps.
So talk a little about what's going on there at Tikkun. I see more stuff going on. I went there once for a
breath work, but that was very early on.
Breath work, very
early on. Lots
been
changed since then. We've built up the place. We added rooms. We're slowly. I still want to do what you did. I want to build a maloka. Just struggling how to do that with hurricane Category 4 winds in South Florida. How to build a maloka.
Why?
Okay, so maybe afterwards you can show me how to do it. You can tell me, give me your secret. But anyways,
I know it's a secret. Just call the guy this is what he builds, and he builds them in South Florida. So we hope
and it could withstand a hurricane Category 3 or 4.
If not, you build it again.
Okay, if you build it, yeah.
I would imagine so. Tyler, do you know this? I hope so.
No, because when I was looking at the malokas in Peru, I was like, this will not work in Florida. One hurricane with 100-mile-an-hour winds will pop that sucker right off the ground.
Well, I don't think it'll pop the sucker off the ground, but I can imagine the roof maybe needing a little bit of repair.
Which is the whole thing. A maloka is all about the roof, right?
No, meaning the beams that are going into the ground and the structure that's
Okay.
holding the roof up and everything else. That's most of it, and the palm on top. That's probably
Okay.
not super
Okay. So
stable.
yeah, we'll look into it. But we're
I'm
gonna.
sure there are ways. I mean, this guy,
Yeah.
the guy who built it for us, has built them all over South Florida, so he would know. Although we haven't had a hurricane here in a while.
But this year they're
fortunately.
expecting
They're
a much
expecting-
worse season than the last
Okay,
couple of years.
They're expecting every year, of course,
Yeah.
hurricane, just in time for the elections. But
Yeah. So you were telling me what's going on at Tikkun. Basically, yeah. So since then, we have a lot of weekend gatherings. We have gatherings for Jewish people, gatherings for the public. We have other types of retreats. I have had workshops rent my place, the Anochi people that you had over here.
oh, cool.
They use my place, Adam Klossner and another, Nachman Four. I love those guys. They're great
Yeah,
guys.
both here. Yeah.
Yeah, they use my place. I'm going to be doing some work with them actually moving forward a little bit. So we've done a lot over there. We brought other medicine servers down to use our facility as well. This weekend we have somebody traveled in from Los Angeles that's going to be using our place. So there's a lot going on there. But really the ultimate I don't want to say that's all fun and games because it's not. It's deep healing, deep work. The ultimate goal, when at least from my perspective, when I started Tikkun, and it wasn't just me, it was me, Alex, and Maishi. We each bring our flavor to it. My flavor, and Maishi's, I think, as well, was very much to have a program for addiction. Have an addiction program because from my experience, from Maishi's, from a lot of people's experience, you have treatment centers throughout Palm Beach County filled up 30, 60, 90 days, people dropping 30, 60, 90 grand, $200,000, and they're going back 3-4 times.
Yes.
It's talk therapy. Not going to say anything against it. For the right individual, that couldn't work.
What can talk against it? There's 90%. 90%
You
of people
just have to look
go
at the
back.
numbers.
Yeah, 90% of people go back.
Right. So, and I believe what I saw that this, with the right type of setting and the right integration and the right type of formula, I think there's a massive need here, and there's a big secret.
Okay, maybe.
Yeah, and
maybe.
that's what we're trying to do.
the proof will be in the proof will be in the pudding that you
Exactly,
deliver
so
a product that
that's what we're trying to do.
has a better result.
Yeah.
So right, I saw that you have something in June. I
2
don't know when
weeks.
this will put
The
out
last
there.
2 weeks of June, we have our first addiction workshop.
So it's 2 weeks.
Yeah.
People come out, ayahuasca ceremonies.
So, what the goal is, and again, this is our first one, but the goal is
Okay, they'll be the oldest child. They get a double.
right, the guinea pig, right? Like I'm the guinea pig at Tikkun because I was struggling. I was like that rat running through the cage. They're testing everything on me. So because Maishi, and he's been sober for many years, and Alex as well. So I'm the one that's had struggles, which is why that's the flavor I bring. Real guys that are struggling, let's see if this works.
Right.
So basically, the idea is to drink ayahuasca in the beginning, the middle, and the end. But let me give you a little background story why I believe that's going to be very impactful and what the 2 weeks looks like. So if you're going to have a 2-week ayahuasca, this is not the jungle of Peru. People aren't in isolation. They're not drinking ayahuasca every day. What does that look like? What does the programming look like? What are they going to do during the day? Twirl their thumb, plant? Like we need to have some sort of programming. So we were struggling with what does integration look like and what does that mean? And I'm searching for answers. So I actually went to the Naichi workshop in Toronto. I attended 2 of their workshops. I loved it. I thought the work that they're doing is just amazing work. And when I was doing breath work with Adam and Ahmed on the last day, it came to me again. This thing talks to me all the time. And I get downloads from, I don't know where they come from, but they come from somewhere. And the download came, a light went off. This is the integration. This is what the formula looks like. If we combine that with ayahuasca, it's a game changer. Absolute game changer. So I spoke to Adam. I'm going to be hiring him. He's going to come down and assist us with the workshop. He has nothing to do with the medicine. Let me just clarify. Anochi has nothing to do with the medicine. They have their own thing. We have our own thing. But I'm hiring him to consult with us to teach me. And they're happy to teach people because they also want to spread the healing to the world. And their workshop is amazing. And we felt that if I could integrate their type of work within our setting, I think is a massive game changer. And I really believe to the core that it's going to work.
Awesome. Beautiful. Okay, may it be. How many people, is it men, women, who you?
So this is our first one. So I don't have all the rules down in place yet. Right now, the idea is that it is, I'm imagine it's a men's workshop for now, but I'm not opposed to, if we'll just have to deal with it if women start signing up. But this all just kind of came to fruition. We just started promoting it now. It's our first one. I think more than likely it's going to be probably men only for this one. But in the future, we'll have different ones geared around different things. But I think it's also important to point out is because I don't want to say the problem with the ayahuasca world is that when you're talking to somebody that's new, they say, well, what does ayahuasca do? People talk about it like it's mun from heaven, like it solves everything. So we're trying to package it in a way and condense it specific in this setting. It's going to be specific for recovery and for struggling people, and try to have a communal aspect to it as well. And if we can gear it towards that, we really believe that it's going to work.
No, it certainly doesn't do everything, because ultimately the real work is down here. The real work is, you keep mentioning about having these intuitions and insights and everything else. I don't know that that's the unique part of your story. The unique part of your story is that you follow the intuitions and insights. Meaning a lot of people can have an idea on medicine that maybe I should do X, Y, and Z. Okay, yeah, maybe a lot of people should do a lot of things. And then some people walk out and say, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to call Anochi. I'm going to set it up.
It's about it's about putting one step forward and doing the next right thing. It's actually, when you say that story, it reminds me, there's like this beautiful story in the Gemara that always touches me to the core, and I think it speaks exactly of what you're talking about. It's a Talmud Yerushalmi. I don't remember the Tanaim's names, but it's like a famous story from the Gemara. And my rabbi in Boca used to always say this story. Like rabbis, they repeat themselves all the time.
We always repeat ourselves.
Yeah. It's like the guy that writes 20 books. He wrote 2 books, but he repackages it in 20.
2 is a lot to it.
Exactly. So basically, he always said this story, and every time I would hear it, it would touch me to the core. And the story is about 2 Tanaim walking in Tveria, and they're walking to a bathhouse, because that's what the way people bathe in those days. Go to the mikveh, used to bathe. There was a whole thing, hot springs and cold plunges, that what we have today, that type of environment. And they would go to the bathhouse to bathe. And on the way, they met a pauper standing outside. You know the story?
No.
And he asked for tzedakah.
You said a pauper, a poor person.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm asking for tzedakah, and they said, don't worry, we're going to get you on the way out. They go to the mikveh, they do their thing, the bathhouse on 3 hours coming out. On the way out, they say he's dead on the side of the road. He died of hunger. And what did they do? They said, okay, we need to not worry about what happened. This guy needs a Jewish burial. We got to just focus on the next thing that we have to do for this guy. Instead of, they could have sat there in their guilt or shame. Oh, it's because of me he died, even though in essence it doesn't work like that. You don't feed somebody for 3 hours. Obviously, he had a hunger problem before, but they could have just sat back in their guilt and shame and not did the next right thing. But what did they do? They went, they gave him a Jewish burial, and while they're doing the tahara, they found he had a gold pocket full of gold coins, right? And the Mefarshim talk about that story. They're like, what does this story teach you? Through them doing their next right thing, their own salvation came about, right? Like, had they not done that, they would have went home, been guilty, shameful. Because of me, he died. And in the end, it had nothing to do with them. By them just doing the next right thing and not getting caught up in their thing,
they found the truth.
They found their truth, and their own, their own freedom came about, right? Their salvation came about by doing the next right thing. So you're saying about trusting my intuition. I found that when I don't, that's when I get into problems. So I learned over the years to just trust it and just don't think too much. Just go with your gut. And I've been right more than I've been wrong. So I've just gone with my gut and my intuition.
Is it possible there's really only one enemy that we're fighting, and it's shame?
Ourselves. Oh, okay.
No, like that. It's really the only tool that the devil has is shame. Is it possible?
It's definitely one of them, absolutely.
No, but that's not what I'm saying. Of course, it's one of them.
Yeah, it's possible.
Is it possible?
Yeah.
It's the only real one.
Yeah.
I was thinking about it. Like, let's say you take sex addiction, because you've mentioned this guilt and shame a few times. Let's take sex addiction. So there's 2 tools: temptation and shame, right? 2 tools that the devil gets you with, so to speak. One is, hey, look at her, right? Wouldn't that be a fun night? Okay, so it lures you in with temptation. And then afterwards, someone walks out of that room and saying, wow, I can't believe I did it. I can't believe I spent the time. I can't believe I spent the money. I can't believe whatever. And then depending on their situation, whether they violated their own ethics or their religion or their marital bond, whatever it is, right? So now they're sitting there with shame. Temptation got them for a few minutes. Shame can get someone for the rest of their life. And as a rule, I've never really met someone who was absolutely destroyed by addiction just from the lure to get into it. They always needed a very, 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 very healthy dose of shame. So I wonder if it's really the only tool of the devil. Like, the only real tool of the devil is shame.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, it could be. Because shame, that's so painful. So painful. Like when you even described this, it hurt me. Like, because I know that feeling, and that you can't take it back. And it's just like, what did I do? And all these things, you know. It's like if I would imagine that's what hell feels like, you know.
Yeah, there's
It is hell.
somewhere where it says that Gehenna is really, but it's different. It's a sense of embarrassment, meaning the healthy shame, but Gehenna is essentially, I don't know where it came from, but someone told it to me. I didn't read it in a book, but someone who's very learned said to me that it's the shame of not reaching your potential, the shame of not reaching one's potential before God. Like being face to face with God and feeling that their potential hasn't been reached. And that's a good, there is a healthy part of shame as well. Without going into the whole topic, I feel like John Broadshed does a very good job talking about healthy shame versus toxic shame. You know, healthy shame is what stops us from going to the bathroom in front of people. Right? I'm separate from you. Right? There's what I will do privately and what I will do publicly. And then unhealthy shame is that separation between one person or another just becomes too wide. You can never understand me. If you knew these things about me, you would never respect me. You would never love me. You would never like me. Like that separation the gap becomes too far, and people feel like they can't cross a divide between them and another human being. There's no connection possible, and the downward spiral goes. Whether it's putting on masks or lying or cheating or whatever else it is, it seems to be in shame. Anyway, the story is quite a fascinating story. There is a tremendous redemption that comes from continuing the story. There is. Like many people who've wallowed in shame for a long time and eventually said, I'm going to get off my ass and do something about this, and then start helping themselves in that issue, whatever it was, whether they found themselves in crushing debt and say, okay, I'm going to do whatever I have to do to get out of this situation. They get out. At some point in time, they realize that they've tapped into internal resources they never knew they had. So as a person, they start feeling better. And then one day there's a knock on the door, and there's their 10-year, there's a version of them from 10 years ago staring them in their eyes and saying, I need your help. And you can give that guy instant hope and says, I know that feeling.
Right.
I know exactly where you are, and I know the way out. And the most learned person can never give that person, the wisest, the tzaddik, no one could give that person the hope that a person who is in that place, look at them and say, I know that feeling, I know that demoralization, I know that spot, I know the way out. I've been stuck in that corner of the forest as well.
Yeah.
So, and then from that place, there is no shame, because there's the deepest bond and the deepest connection, that divide that's crossed at that moment when one human can look at another human and say, I know your prison and I know the way out. Like, shame doesn't have any room, any air to breathe in that conversation. Anyway, just to segue on shame, which is important, an important topic. So back to this 2-week thing. So the idea is to bridge the two between Anochi, between what you've learned from
between Anochi type of workshop.
The concepts,
it's not actual Anochi,
no,
but just the facilitators are amazing. I love those guys. So they're going to teach us, but they're going to help us with it for our first one. So to take those concepts, and which I believe is integration, because like I know that when I did their workshop, when I had a breath work the final day, I never had such a deep intensive breath work, because I was already vulnerable. I was already raw. I was willing to look at myself. So I cracked during the breath work. And I thought to myself, what if you had a week of this and then you did ayahuasca? Like, I think part of the problem, again, with ayahuasca is people come and they just drink. There's no preparation. What if you had a few days of preparation? What if you did this workshop type of stuff, vulnerable work to get you to crack a little bit, and you're more raw? You'd be more open to it. So that's kind of the idea. And we believe that there's something there, absolutely. So that's what we're doing.
Right.
And I know I'm not, but it's not because I'm better. I went through the same struggles myself, then it helped me. And I know it helped myself, and I feel the need to bring this to other people.
It's important. It's very important work, and especially to bring it within the Jewish community?
Absolutely, because I know this because people open up to me because I know I had these struggles. Again, people just view addiction. Oh, that guy that's an opiate addict or heroin, he's doing it every single day. That's probably much less of a people, much more of the population of the people like me, the guys that are struggling and they're not quite willing or ready to admit that they're struggling, but yet they're drinking every other day, or they're doing who knows what every other day, or they're in the casinos every other night, they're blowing their life savings, and then they swear to themselves they're not going to do it again, and they do it again, and then it's this constant thing, and they're doing it for years. Yes, they have a problem. This will help that type of problem.
Right. The real problem with addiction is the denial of it.
Right.
That's where...
And I lived it myself.
Yeah.
I denied it myself for many years.
I mean, that's the first step, right? We admitted we were addicts.
Right.
Right. To get to that place is really hard, but it's easier. It's easier when there's more damage in someone's life,
Right.
in some way. So I understand that. Yeah, sex addiction has that quality where even someone who's steeped in it could, on the outside, be functional. Meaning someone can't be a daily cocaine user and be functional. It's very, 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 very tough. I don't know what kind of work they can be functional, but to be the office, running their life, maybe there could be. But, or a daily alcohol user, it starts bleeding out in different areas, starts smelling like it. But when it comes to many other things, especially in the sex addiction realm, people can be very, very functional, big doctors, big lawyers, big everything. And there's still the ability to maintain the facade of function. And then within addictions, there's levels as well.
So I think sex addiction is so strong to the point where when I was single for 8 years, and if I was like davening, putting on tefillin and learning, like the thought of a strip club would be like, no, I can't do that. I can't go into that tuma. So how would I put myself in that tuma? By first doing cocaine. Then it gave me the ability to go to the strip club. So I think even my substance abuse, the underlying factor was more the sex addiction. Like I was only using to get to what I really wanted to do. Because I would not walk into a strip club unless you were altered and put down my inhibitions by putting something in my system, because then all bets are off. You put that in your system, all bets are off. Whatever your rules and regulations that you try to confine to are out the window. So,
yeah, there's a sex therapist we interviewed here. I don't think we put out the podcast yet, but probably will soon. And she says that she talks a lot about addiction, and then she's also a sex therapist. And she believes that in the rooms of AA, the rooms of NA, the rooms of GA, half the people are sex addicts.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point. Because
and
they're numbing themselves to get to really where they really want to get to.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
I believe that.
Yeah. I know it myself. I wouldn't walk in, but then I put that. Then it was almost like I manipulated myself to get to where I wanted to go.
Where you want to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. I went the reverse because I started working on my sex addiction, but then I realized till today I won't drink too much. I won't get into it. And now I don't want to, but as I was getting into recovery, where I did have the desire sometimes to get wrecked a little bit, I realized that being in that state, I was not able to stay sober. I say 3 drinks, I feel like I'm single.
Exactly.
I feel like I'm much better looking and I'm single. Got it. Okay. I'm thinking if there's any.
Yeah, so I think you wanted to go to you were trying to find. So what happened to make me at that point run back to Peru? Like what was coming up for me? I think you wanted to ask me about that.
I was trying to get a sense of the benefit one may receive from Peru versus doing ayahuasca generally, which I've done. But I think you explained it. What I'm interested in is the elusive information that you were seeking. What was it that you couldn't quite grasp, but you knew? You kept referring to the possibility that maybe you were raped.
Yeah, so basically what happened is that I went to, the first time I ever drank ayahuasca, I saw that there was some sort of history in my family of like some sort of sex abuse, that it went back generations, and I couldn't quite pinpoint it exactly, but it felt like it was like, came from, maybe my grandmother, maybe my great-grandmother.
I know that feeling.
Yeah, and people used to ask me, how do you know? I said, I just know. I just wasn't ready to look it in the eye because it was too scary and I didn't want to see who it was. But there was something that like I'm downloading from generational trauma that's in me, that's in my lineage, from my mother's side, that there was something there.
Right. There's a sense that you're tapping into something. I felt it. You're tapping into something that feels very real, but there's no conscious memory of
Right,
it
and you
being part of you.
and
Like, wow,
looking
this
for
is-
exactly. So
Yeah.
that theme was already existing, and then I went up to New York to drink. I wanted to try a different server out and see what it's all about, because there's two different schools of thought in the world of medicine. You know, there's the Shipibo tribe, where they don't try to put bells and whistles. You're going to suffer. You're going to have a good time. It doesn't matter. They're not going to try to control the outcome. You're going to get to what you get, which means if you're going to lay on a mat and suffer for 6 hours, then so be it. The light will come at the end of the tunnel, right? It's like going to the dentist. As painful as it is, you feel good afterwards. But then if you have a pleasant experience where you're up there in Shemayim and you're talking to Malachim, fine. We're not going to control it. We're not going to try to control the outcome. You're going to go through what you go through. And then there's a school of thought like the Santa Diamond Church that does it in New York, where they make it a song circle. And there's a lot of distractions, and you're joining the song circle, and it's part of a circle. So I wanted to try the other school of thought out just to see the difference for myself. And again, it's not better or worse. I'm not promoting one or the other. It's just different. It's a different school of thought. And if you speak to people from that school of thought that say, well, if I need to experience a trauma and I need to suffer, maybe that's what I need. Your song circle is distracting me. They'll tell you, well, Hashem can cure everything, right? Like Hashem can take away all the things. You don't need to sit in your misery or sit with your insecurities or sit with your traumas. Hashem's got the ability to heal. So again, it's just two different schools of thought. It's like Rava and Abaya, not comparing. It's just different philosophies. So I went up, I tried that, and I had this horrible feeling that I saw the 3 incidents that happened to me in my life, where I know the isolated incidents that I was molested, and I got this horrible feeling that a lot more happened to me than just that, and I buried it so deep that I forgot about it, and I was about to go there, and I kept getting distracted by the song circle. Go there, say, come to the circle, come. So I tried to leave the room. I tried to process it. It was too late. Once it was gone, but I knew that there was something I needed to address. So then I came back, and I was scared to drink ayahuasca ever since. So I went to Tikkun Healing Center, and I was holding space for other people. And when you hold space, you just drink a very small amount just to tap into the energy to be of service to others. But you don't go in, right? You don't do enough that you go in. And it was that time that I had this horrible feeling that I walked away with, like I was raped. I can't quite explain it. It's no logic, but like I felt like I was raped. And I went to somebody else that was there, because I thought when you're holding space, you could sometimes tap into people's energy, and you have to know what's yours, what's not yours. And I'm like, did this happen to you? They said, no, absolutely not. And I spoke to the person serving afterwards, and the conclusion was that maybe it was me. And I knew, from that moment, I knew I had to go to Peru. I knew that I needed to get somewhere, escape, to find this search for this thing that keeps coming up, and to the point where I'm now scared to drink again. Right?
And what happened when you did?
What happened when I did?
What happened when you went to Peru? What did you?
So when I went to Peru, the first, and I tell everybody this because like I'm the one that's involved with the Healing Center. I should know best, right? Tell people you have to surrender, but as much as you tell people you have to surrender, it's freaking hard to do, right? Yeah. It's like every time you drink ayahuasca, you're like, what am I doing to myself again? Why am I doing this? It's hard to surrender, and it's different every time. And I went in with so much fear, and I was literally trembling. My body was shaking. I was trembling to the point where I was so fearful. And the maestro told me afterwards that they saw a black scorpion like entering me from the top. Where when I finally got to the point where I was okay to drink more ayahuasca, she cut me off. She said, no, you're not ready. You're going to be here for 2 weeks. This is a process. We're not giving you any more. She saw I just wasn't ready. And I was very I came all the way here to do this. And the first night I drank ayahuasca, I just wasn't ready. And I walked away with more fear. And that's also sometimes that people have issues with this stuff, because if you don't surrender, you can walk away with more fear. So from that first night in Peru, it was actually my second night, because they do it every other night, and I was dieting. But I was just getting into the process. I had just gotten off the flight. It was only a day and a half. I was dieting another plant. I just wasn't ready. I walked away with a ton of fear, so much pain. And I was seeing stuff, and I wasn't making sense of it. But at that point, I geared myself up. I'm like, I'm here for a reason. And I davened, and I said Tehillim, and I journaled, and there was a lake over there. I went to the mikvah, and I really brought it on, and I was finally ready. I was finally ready to face that fear. And I walked in, and I even told the assistant, I said, maybe this didn't happen, but whatever happened, I'm ready to see it. I'm ready to face it. And it was like all gearing up to this. And I went in, and for half an hour my body was shaking. You ever see like those spaceships that are taking off, and in the beginning they're shaking for the first like 60 seconds until they go smooth sailing? That's how it was for me. I was shaking to the core, like I was so scared, but I was open. I was like, I'm ready to face it. Hashem, show me what you have to show me. I kept telling myself, trust the medicine, trust the medicine, trust. I just kept hearing from Alex back here saying, trust the medicine. I'm like, trust Hashem. It's not going to show you anything that's not good for you. There's a reason why it's going to show you this. I kept saying, trust the medicine, trust the medicine. And I was shaking to the core. And then I start flashing. I start seeing flashbacks. All of a sudden, I'm seeing the street that I grew up on in Detroit, Michigan, Oak Park. I'm seeing the old streets. I'm seeing the old row. I'm seeing my across the street neighbor, this horrible guy that my mother used to tell me, stay away from, stay away from. He's flashing in front of me. And then I'm like, how old was I? It's like, were you 7? Were you 5? No, I was 5 years old. It's showing me you were 5 years old, Eliezer. 1983. It's showing me. And then like it brought me there, and I saw that 2 people when I was 5 years old molested me. They sexually assaulted me. I kept smelling turpentine gasoline. I felt like they put me to sleep. And I saw it, and it was I can't describe it. It was such a, like, you ever have a pot that you can't quite clean, and the bottom of the pot you have all this yuck and this gook? Like, it showed me a road going thousands of miles deep in my soul, this like black, red devil scar that it left on me. And I saw head on, like it was like looking the devil in the eye, what a trauma does to somebody. And I can't even put it into words. Like, I felt it, and it was so painful. It was so disgusting, and it was such a like type of feeling. I can't articulate it into words what I felt.
Can you try?
I felt like I was injected with this poison that's been sitting inside of me ever since, that it was so painful and so hard. And how could a 5-year-old boy go through something like that? And how come his parents weren't watching him? And how could people do this to you? And I was such a precious child, a precious soul. I was just like a little boy. And like, how could people do such a thing, such a vile event to such a young boy? And the scar that it left on me. And then I started to see all parts of my life, how that was the pain that was in there that I'm always trying to numb, that I couldn't quite identify. And then how it came up in every aspect of my life. It was always there. It was always there. And because it was so painful, and so that I buried it so deep in my neshama, that it just never happened. It's like I literally never happened, but my subconscious knew that there was something there. And that night, I can't describe, I was crying for 3 hours straight. I couldn't cry enough. Like, it wasn't relieving the pain. It was like, as much as I was crying, it wasn't doing it, but it felt like I needed to see that. I needed to purge that. And at that moment, I felt somewhat of a relief that I could identify this now, and now I can work on it. And I was just purging. I was like, I couldn't purge anymore. I couldn't cry anymore. It was like I was so painful, so horrible, that the entire night was just very painful. Like, I never experienced such pain in my life. Like, I cannot explain like what I felt that night. And it was a damn good thing I was in Peru, because I needed to be there. That's why I realized, like, the world's going to wait for me. It's going to wait for Eliezer, because if I can't heal, there's no world to go back to. But if I can take this time for myself and actually heal it and deal with it, then I'll have a beautiful message, and I could bring something back and offer the world something. And that night was just such excruciating pain that it was, and I saw the imprint that left on me. And then the next 36 hours, I was just crying, journaling, and then davening that, because from my experience with ayahuasca was that it's not going to show you the same, at least my experience, my own experience until then, was it doesn't bring you back to the same moment unless it has something else to show you. So I was like, okay, Hashem, you showed this to me. It was so painful. I was like, please be gentle next time. Please be kind. Yes, I'm open, but please be kind. I need, now that I saw this, I need the healing aspect. Now, please. And I knew I was going to drink ayahuasca 3 more times. Wow. So I knew I was going to be there for another 10 days. And now that I saw this, I saw exactly why. Everything made sense. It all came together. And I saw why I was in Peru. I saw why I felt like I needed to go to Peru. It was all, I was connecting all the dots in my life. Everything made sense.
Explain that, to being in Peru. What was What was so
like
essential?
why did I go to Peru? Was a guy with 8 children? I started Tikkun Healing Center. I could drink ayahuasca there. Like, what am I doing running to Peru? There's no logical explanation. I was called and I felt like I needed to go, that there was something I needed to see, and it showed it to me. And I don't think I could have gotten there here. I don't think I...
You felt you needed that time. That's not a great ad for Tikkun.
No, there's nothing to do with
kidding.
Tikkun. Wherever I go, this is nothing...
I'm kidding.
Yeah. No, listen, I love Tikkun. This is why I started this. So I went to Peru. Alex from Tikkun told me go to Peru. Right? Like, it's not contrary, right? Like, these things are not, it's like you always say.
It's true. It's not a one and done thing.
Right. It's not.
This
is real work, and there's no magic switches in life. It's not like you drink ayahuasca and all your problems get healed.
Exactly.
It shows you
what's
the
next.
avoid that you need to do. So people ask me, and everything started to make sense. I remember when I was 6 years old, my mother brought me to the doctor. I had an incontinence issue. I used to have trouble holding it in and not going to the bathroom on time. And I used to always soil my pants a little bit as a little boy. And I remember her bringing me now it all came back to me. I struggled with that for 3 years, from 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. She brought me to the doctor when I was 7 years old. The doctor said to my mother, did he experience any serious trauma? She said, no. And she said, okay, well then keep him on the toilet for an extra half an hour every day. And that should do the trick. That never did the trick because it was an emotional problem. And everything in my life, it all made sense to me. I was like, this makes sense. Why I act this way, why I do this, why am I always running to the sex stuff? Like, there was something in me that I always viewed sex in a certain way, in a guiltful, shameful way. And that's why I found comfort in the strip clubs, right? So let me say what happened the next night. So I came to the next night and I was like, okay, now I need the healing. And then again, it brought me back there, and it answered a few more questions, but then it brought up more questions. It answered the questions like, why didn't I share about this with my parents? Why didn't I run to my parents to share? Like, I should have shared this with my parents. Why didn't I? And I saw intuitively as a little boy, if I would have shared that with my father probably would have done something so severe he'd be in jail for the rest of his life. I saw that intuitively as a child. I knew not to share it, and ultimately as a result. And then I'm the oldest of 10. 8 of my siblings would have never been born. I promise you, if I shared that story, there's a good chance a lot of my siblings. So I felt like I was holding pain for them, for their future, my whole life to protect them. As a Bukhari, I always protected them, but I felt like I held this in their protection, because if this would have come out as a young boy, then there's a very good chance that a lot of them would have never been born.
Was there some significant... Was there some significance for you about the time you did eventually confront it? Why it couldn't be a year before, a year after?
I wasn't ready. And I think it took all of my pain and of my shame and of my screw-ups and my what happening to get me to search for something, because I knew there was something else from my past that I couldn't quite identify, like why this was happening to me. And that night, in the middle of the night, I was crying. I was like, and I went to this guy, David, who helps facilitate. He's the English-speaking guy there. He speaks English, Polish, Spanish. I said to him, I was like, why is this happening again? He's been facilitating for 17 years. He said, ask the medicine why it's happening again. You could talk to it. So I went back in. I'm like, why are you doing this to me again? It said, Eliezer, all the answers are in your heart. So I said, ask your heart. So I asked my heart. I'm like, Eliezer, why are you showing this to me again? What is the purpose of this? Why do I have to live this? It said because you need to spread awareness about this. You need to talk to people about it, and your healing will come through sharing your story with other people, and by letting people know that this stuff does exist, and it destroys generations and it destroys lives. And you have all these young families and young couples that bring babysitters into their home, and they have no idea, they're oblivious. Like, that you need to educate them, that they need to check who you bring into your home, who you let come in contact with your children, because sometimes it happens with people that you're not expecting. And through your sharing of the story, your own healing will come about as well. And that's the message that I walked away with after that third night. So fast forward, when I came home, that first Shabbos table, I shared it with all my 8 children and shared it with my wife, and not to become a victim, to empower them, to give them chizuk, that this stuff does happen. And I saw how it destroys generations. Like, you can have one guy that's suffering from addiction, something happened, and then his children suffer, and they suffer. It's like just talking about it.
Specifically about sex abuse.
Yeah, sex abuse. That I couldn't. I'm talking about it now, but believe me, when I discovered about this, it wasn't easy.
So
to
this
discuss.
very much is your integration, in the sense that. Oh, so I didn't give my definition of integration. One, I mean, I
Right.
like the way you described it, that it's a word that's used a lot. So one thing is the preparation of it. Right? Preparation, we like strip out anything we consume. So a lot of people focus on the food that they're eating, but we consume a lot of things. We consume with our eyes, we consume with our mind, we consume with our ears, we consume by being around certain people. So get to a space where you've consumed as little junk as possible. Say if I'm bringing a deep cleaner into my house, what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean the house. That way, the deep cleaner can focus on things that only they can do, right? If they have a heavy-duty machine, for example, in our warehouse, every once in a while, it will bring in these machines to scrub the floors. The last thing you want is to have dirt on the floor, because then these guys, before they can bring the heavy-duty machine, they got to sweep the floors. You have them in there for 6 hours, and they don't even get to use the heavy machinery for the first 3 hours. They got to clean the dirt. So I say the same thing. Going to an ayahuasca ceremony, you're bringing in the deep cleaners. What are you going to have? What are you going to have your Instagram you looked at yesterday for? Right? Get that out of the way. We can have the piece of meat, right? The burger or the beer you ate yesterday. Get that all out of the way as much as possible. And then the deep cleaning you can use the 6 hours for deep cleaning. That's preparation. Then afterwards is you can get a million different messages. But I said to people, if every ceremony that I did, I took one thing and I said, this is going to change in my life. For example, in your case, it was very clear. I need to share my story. I can help people. And I can tell you now, hearing your story is helpful for me. I always say these conversations are conversations that stand alone, independent of whether they get published or when they get published. There's value in it in and of itself. That's one. And the second is that it gets published, and whoever hears it, hopefully there's a lot of benefit. There's a lot of benefit to them. But in hearing your story, I know that it will help a lot of people. That one message that you got from the journey to do something, that is the integration. If I changed one thing from every single journey I did in my actual life, that's it. I don't need more. I don't need more because, like you said, like you had in the example of the story in Gemara Yerushalmi, right? I'm going to go do a burial, and all of a sudden, this message comes, and it's such an important message that it gets documented, right, for thousands of years.
For us to talk about it,
right? For us to talk about it here, and for us to be documented for centuries of Jews to be able to learn from that story, right? So imagine the power of just taking that step, and the same is true with the journey. So kudos for listening to the message of the medicine and sharing your story here. Obviously the conversation of child sex abuse is not new. And there have been many people, including myself, speaking about this for the last 10 or 15 years. So if I asked you, before this experience in Peru, it seems like it gave you an understanding, a very deep understanding of what it really is, child sex abuse, how it really affects a child, a soul, a young person. And not only that person, but the generations of it. Where were you before on the issue? Like hearing the community talk about child sex abuse, and where are you now? If you were around the Shabbos table,
so I was very, I guess, disconnected from it. Like I'm a person, I'm a father, so of course it's painful and hurtful when you hear about child sex abuse. But I always I know I was abused a few times, and I know that it didn't impact me to that level, but I would be open and understand that it does impact a lot of other people, but it happened to on multiple occasions. But I was always at it's in the same darga as sex, as substance
Physical
abuse or physical abuse or
Got it.
exactly physical abuse or any other sort of abuse. It's just another thing out there.
So you were at the intersection of
like not really
of compassion and indifference, or
impact.
compassion and dismissive,
right? Not really seeing the impact. But when I went to Peru, again, I can't even articulate in words. I saw the impact that it had on my soul. That it literally shaped every decision in my life that I've ever made, and how I was always running back somewhere, and I couldn't quite pinpoint. Again, not that I'm blaming anything on anything, but
you're just describing objective facts.
So
objective
how
facts.
it really impacted me, my children, my children's children, my mother, my grandmother, like generational, this type of abuse changes generations, right? It does. So that's why I was able to see that we have the power to stop that cycle, right? Like it is a cycle. I think if it happens to a great grandmother and it continuously happens. And so my perspective on it completely changed. And my wife was always more paranoid about people bringing it to the house. I'm always like, you're being paranoid. It's fine. They go to high school. They're in 11th grade. There's nothing to worry about. I saw now how you need to be worried. She's right. You need to be worried about this stuff. You need to be worried about every single person that comes in contact with your children, because sometimes it does happen with people you're not expecting. And
How would you describe the effects of child sex abuse?
I think the effects of it, I was always searching for something that happened to me, couldn't quite explain why I was always acting out. And now that I discovered that, I'm seeing a direct correlation to my acting out and these imprints that I had on my neshama as a young boy. And I think the fact that I even accomplished as much as I did is amazing, and I was very strong. And if I want to put purpose to my whole story, I think that I was destined for something great. Because my neshama was destined to sit here and tell this story, that in a weird sort of way had to happen to me, because now I can help other people with it, and I could share my story. But it absolutely impacted me,
Right. I've learned a lot about child sex abuse, not so much from my own story. There was some that I learned from there, but a lot from hearing other stories, right? Because then you start seeing patterns and you start seeing differences. Like I was abused many, many times, quote unquote, mildly, by the same person over several years. You see kind of the difference between the sustained abuse versus one-time abuse, and the difference between ages, and the differences between someone who's abused. What's the relationship? Were they a teacher? Were they a spiritual teacher? Were they a rebbe? Were they a family member? Were they a parent? Right? All of those, and how those impact. Did they tell someone? How was it received when they told someone? You start paying attention to patterns. But what I've noticed more than anything is that there's no way to understand the impacts of child sex abuse if we don't view it in spiritual terms, because it doesn't make sense. The damage is not, there's no mathematical equation that you can create that can explain to someone why one time, not why it happened, why there's one experience with sexual abuse can impact someone in the way it does. For example, if someone was physically abused, let's say they're walking home from school and they're beat up by a couple of strangers. There can be an impact, sure. It can be a very traumatic experience, and they could be more worried in the street. They could be more worried walking on certain streets, be more worried walking at night. They can trust people a little bit less. There could be a very strong impact from that experience, no doubt. But you'll almost never see not almost never, I can't imagine adding a sexual component to that same experience, and now there's lifelong devastation. Why? What's the difference? There was a lack of safety. There was abuse of power. There were all the elements for someone to be left with the trauma, which they are. But then you add sexuality to that, and somewhere in there was a sexual component, and the devastation is tremendous. So the only explanation I've come up with is that you have our soul, our spirit, and you kind of have layers of rings around our spirit. So, for example, our sexuality is very intimately intertwined with our spirit. You have our mind, our psychology, our body, and each one is kind of like an outer ring. So if just our physical body is hurt by something, it doesn't damage our spirit in the same way that our sexuality is damaged. Because what I found is that when there is sexual abuse, the only way to describe the trauma is a deep and profound spiritual trauma. In many ways, all abuse is spiritual abuse. Because even when we say physical abuse, psychological abuse, or mental abuse, what we're actually talking about is the spirit being abused. Because you wouldn't say someone is physically abused who's missing an arm. You would say he's injured. Right? So physical abuse is, there's no obvious abuse. I'm looking at this person today, and I'm not seeing, scars on them. I'm not seeing physical deformities, but there's an effect, and that effect is to their spirit. And for whatever reason, sexuality just hits in a different way, and I've seen it over and over and over again.
I saw that there. I saw this like black scar with smoke and like red, almost like the devil, like sitting in the bottom of my soul. That was just like, this evil thing there but then I saw that on my fourth time I came there that it lost a lot of power. I saw that it lost a lot of power. Like once I was able to identify it, I saw that it wasn't going to control me the way that it always has controlled me until now.
Right. Because it seems to me from speaking to you that you don't feel like it's completely gone.
I don't think it's ever going to be gone. But I think you can overpower it.
You don't think
you could get control over it?
You don't think there's any way to clean the trauma completely?
I don't think so. I'm not a trauma expert, but I...
From a spiritual
But why
perspective.
do we want to? From a spiritual... Like, sometimes you want the
Well, you want to
pain.
get the devil out of the system.
Right,
There'll be a
but
mark,
like-
but...
Right.
You know, like for Yaakov when he fought, there was a limp at the end,
Right.
but the devil was gone.
Right. Who knows what was really happening in that story?
Whatever was happening, meaning there's a difference between a limp and, being infested.
Right.
So I think there is a way to get it out completely, and I think these conversations and the feedback and communications you get from others will do a lot to clear out more of the black, clear out more of the black smoke.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is deep, and I had it was actually the last ayahuasca journey I did, which was almost a year ago. And in that one, I was also in service. Someone asked me, hey, can you help out? There was someone who was doing it for the first time, and they felt more comfortable with me in the room. And I said, I've never done that before, but okay, I'll go. And at different points in time, it felt like the ayahuasca was telling me, hey, go here, help this guy out in this way, do this, do that. I was like, okay. And whenever I completed a mission, so to speak, there was a gift that I received. That was like my whole journey. I was like, go do this, and then come back, you get your gift. I can lie on my mat for 10 seconds or whatever, it's only a couple of minutes. Whatever. Time is not important in that space. And then at one point in time, I literally collapsed on the floor of the ceremony, right in the middle of the room. Ceremonial space, the shaman was in the middle of an Ikaro. And it took me back to
And you had only done a facilitator's dose. I'm assuming a small.
Correct, but I'm super sensitive to ayahuasca.
Right.
Super, it's like I smell it, I'm already in. And also, there's the preparation going in and everything else. But I was seeing a lot, and I collapsed to the floor during it, and I had a vision of my wife just kind of like her hand on my back, right, like me lying down, like at the end of the day, and her right on my back, and how uncomfortable it was for me just to sit in the silence of that and the peace and receiving and accepting that. And as I was saying, it was kind of like the most difficult part of my journey. You think, okay, like what is so tough about a vision of lying in bed being caressed? Like this should be bliss. But it was very uncomfortable for me, this feeling of I must be doing something. Like why am I here? Is it okay to be receiving this? And it pulled me back into the abuse, which I thought at that point was cleaned out. It pulled me back into the abuse and showed me, no, this is still like a remnant of it, an inability to receive comfortably without the threat of something bad coming out of it. And it could be because of the way the abuse was introduced, that it was nice and soft and friendly and everything else. And then it was like a real grooming process. It sounds like in your case, that's why I was talking about like the patterns. The patterns are so important to the story. Right, so in your case, it sounded abrupt, right, and violent, and the people were bad people, and you associated them with negativity, like, possibly even you were put to sleep or forced. In my case, it was a longer grooming process where this person appeared to be friendly and kind, and there isn't one that's better than the other. It like whichever track it comes down, those are the tracks that it disrupts. So if it's down the violent track, then it's the stranger track, then it disrupts something there. If it's down the friend and a trusted person, and then some of those feelings then become ruptured. So in this case, because I had fond feelings of him, because I had trusting feelings of him, because I looked up to him, because I felt safe with him, because all of those feelings were part of the eventual abuse, then those same feelings now have kind of like the track marks on it. So if I'm going back into that space and it's like, oh, this feels nice, I'm being caressed, I'm receiving, like I don't have anything to worry about. Oh, really? That's what you thought then? So like the analogy I had in ayahuasca was like, it's like a snake that lays eggs. So the snake gets in through the abuse, and you can think you pulled the snake out, but there's a little egg, and it can kind of rehatch into another snack, rehatch. And I asked the medicine, I said, will it ever stop hatching eggs? Like, how do I know that I got it out and there isn't one left? And said, that's not the point, because you always should be super careful with sexuality. Always be super careful. And that's a lesson. Oh, even if it's not, even if it can't, always think it could. Because with sexuality, we got to be so freaking careful. And I think that's the message, is that it's a very, very, very sensitive part of us. And there's no question that in today's day and age, it's something that we're verschmutzing a little bit. We're not.
Absolutely.
It's losing its sacredness. It's losing its specialness in different ways, not necessarily in the abuse, right? In some ways, we're fighting and championing against abuse, possibly more than ever in history. But there are other ways where we're desecrating sexuality in many ways. So that's the message I was left with. So you feel like this is your mission now?
I feel like, yes, I feel like it's my avodah. It's my avodah, and I have a responsibility to share this with others, and Hashem gave me a gift. I'm viewing this as a gift. Like I saw the last night in Peru, that I saw that it's beautiful that we come from the tribe of Israel and the Shvatim, and I come from Shevet Levi, and I'm a Bechar, and I felt like I was crowned on the last night, like Hashem was crowning me, that everything I went through in my life, everything, and it was very, very challenging growing up, that all came to this, and there's a purpose for everything, and it's now my avodah, my mission, to use that to my benefit, and not only will I heal myself, but I'll help others as well by doing this type of work.
Yeah. As I'm speaking to you, I'm understanding like why the specifics, understanding on some level why the specifics are so important, because you were actually previous, hopefully you don't mind me saying it this way, but you were a danger to the cause, because you had memories of going through it and you can easily minimize it. Right? So meaning you had to go through that experience of being able to kind of minimize it. Yeah, I've been through abuse too.
Right.
I've been through abuse, and I've been on the other end of that, where people said to me, I remember calling a guy and I invited him to a JCW event, this going back 10 years, because I just had a feeling, I just had a feeling that this guy was abused. So he had some of the hallmarks. So I called him, I said, hey, we're doing this JCW event. It was at the JLC. Do you want to come out? He's like, no, it's not for me. So I said, you sure? It should be nice, whatever. So he said, I was sexually abused and it didn't affect me. So I said, then how did I know? It didn't affect you, then how did I know? Why do you think I called you? But that guy I remember the story. Why did I remember the story? I heard something yesterday that memory is always linked with emotion, right? You're not going to remember what you ate 3 years ago, but you will if there's a story around it. And the story you'll remember if there's an emotion linked to it. So obviously that phone call left me with certain emotion, and the work that I was doing around child sex abuse, it was like a sprinkling of cold water on it, saying, oh, I was sexually abused too, and it's not a big deal.
Right.
Why are you making so much noise? So for you to have gone through that journey of believing that you were, and it didn't affect you so much, and come out the other side and say no, like that wasn't even the main story.
Right, that's why
Right.
and I saw that the reason why I gravitated to that other stuff, and the other stuff wasn't a big deal, was because it wasn't a big deal in comparison to what actually really happened to me. And that thing that happened to me was so deep and so painful that I buried it so deep as if it never happened. And it took, I'm 46 years old. So it took me 40 years of my life to figure this out.
Yeah.
To identify it. Like, think about how our mind really works and how deep, as if it never happened. But traces over my life showed me that there's something happened. I just couldn't quite identify it.
And these two individuals, you know who they are?
Yes.
And
No. One of them, I know who he is. He's not living. And the other one was just one of his deadbeat friends. I saw some names and stuff there, but I'm not like thinking too much into it.
Right.
I know the main person who was. He's not living anymore.
Gotcha. Very.
I went up and I looked it up afterwards, and I did research, and I saw that he wasn't living.
Got it. Fascinating. It is a it's a huge topic. It's an important topic, and maybe there's a reinforcement. And for me, that's what I'm taking from it around it is kind of where I got to with child sex abuse is, okay, been there, done that, dealt with it. I'm good. Like there's other topics to address. And as I'm talking to you, it's like, no, maybe this is the central one.
I think that there's so many people that, and this is lines up with what we're doing at Tikkun. There are so many people struggling with substance abuse. And if you peel behind the layers and you sit them down and you get to the root cause, you will find that a lot of them have been sexually molested. Some sort of sexual abuse in their background.
Yes.
And they don't know it. They're oblivious to it. They think maybe there's something, but like me, classic example.
There are many people who I've, that's why I mentioned this. There are many people who wrestle with this confusion. Was I not? Did it happen? And, little small memories start coming up. And then others will question also, the memory only came up under ayahuasca. It only came up, in that way. But why did it come up for one person, not the other person? Right? Why did this happen? So kind of mixed in with this, with when someone is abused, is the confusion, is the secrecy, is the don't tell. Somewhere in there's the subtle threat or communication to the child. Don't say anything. And then what you said about your father was also very powerful, is because as parents we can think that that's the way to be with our children, that they know if they tell us anything, then we will come to their rescue and protection. But if we're not really being careful about that, not about us coming to their protection, but about them being protected, then in our desire to protect them, in our desire, our professed desire to protect them, we actually end up removing any protection because they become more afraid of us than of anyone else.
That's why it's important to talk to your kids about this stuff so they feel comfortable that if anything ever happens, they can come to you. Right.
But that element that you said of, in order to feel comfortable, they have to feel comfortable that your response is going to be measured and appropriate.
Right. And
it's
maybe
not burning the guy's house down.
Had I had that scenario, maybe the next 20 or 30 years of my life, I could have done something different.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, there's no question. There's a difference between a stain that's been allowed to, sit for a while. It takes a lot longer to clean, and it attracts other dirt. There's no question about it. It attracts other dirt, and every single time there's an interaction, a negative sexual interaction, it adds additional layers of dirt. Okay. I appreciate this. The conversation came at the right time for me in multiple ways, for myself personally, and also for the individual who called me recently about their journey to Peru.
Okay.
Which ironically, now you're reminding me, is they're one of the people who I've spoken to who was wrestling with abuse that came up in ceremony and how much of it was true or not true, and confronting and confusion and did they not.
Tell them to get ready.
That aspect as well. And I won't share that, but where our call ended yesterday was I said that, the world's always communicating if we're paying attention. And I ended the call with a prayer that one of us, either them or me, would, a communication would come clearly to us whether it was appropriate for them to do a trip like that, because it's not for the faint of heart, clearly. And I'm going to communicate to them that based on this conversation, I think it's fully appropriate.
So then it was already successful.
What?
So then this was already successful.
Right. And what I said as well was that additionally is that whatever the decision is, it should come with a full heart. Meaning, if someone chooses to make that trip and go, so go without looking backwards. You made the decision, you go, not with this question of, am I doing something wrong? Is that what I desire? No, this is the right thing to do. I'm going full force. I don't have any questions about it. Or I'm not going and I don't have any questions about it. I don't have to have one foot there and one foot here. So if my word means anything to them, and they chose to call me, and I asked multiple times, why did you call me? There are other people too. Call on the subject. I don't have experience specific with this, but I guess someone somewhere understood that you and I would be talking today, which also was a last minute cancellation. This is a Friday. I don't usually do podcasts on Friday, but there was someone in town. Flight missed. So, okay. It all worked out in a perfect
yes, thank you. Thank you for having
way.
me, giving me. And funny enough, just to wrap it up, when that happened, when I saw on the final day, why is this happening and what's my message about sharing it, your name came to me. I can't explain why, but it said, I need to call Eli Nash and ask him his advice.
You
So
sure
if
you can't explain why?
Do you remember that I called
Was it
you?
you're sure you can't explain why?
Do you remember? I guess
I remember
'cause
you called. I remember
you're
speaking, yeah.
involved. So because I was struggling with a certain aspect of it, and I called you to ask your advice, and you actually referred me to a couple podcasts to listen to. So this all came about naturally. And then
Yeah,
I sent
remember.
you.
I remember speaking to you, but I don't remember the details of.
I had
the
asked you a question
conversation.
about something, how to handle a situation, but I was struggling with about opening up to my parents about the story without hurting them. And then you had shared with me a podcast, like, are you being their parent? Or are you maybe, in other words, if you're still worried about how they're going to feel, then that's a problem, right? Like where you're being the parent and
Right, exactly.
you understand? So
Which is what you did as a child, also.
right, exactly. Yeah. So
Right.
it was a very impactful conversation. I
Being as
thought
a child, you became your father's parent
about not wanting to share.
and your
right.
and your siblings' parents.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly. So it was a profound conversation, and then I was in Israel last week. I was there for 10 days with my wife, and I'm putting together the flyer for Tikkun, and I'm like, my imposter syndrome's starting to kick in. So they're saying, who do I think I am? Putting a flyer, addiction workshop. Who are you? And it's like I was like, nope. I'm doing this for a reason. There's a reason. I'm going to put one foot forward. And I knew the flyer wasn't perfect, and I didn't have it all worked out yet. I'm like, you know what? I'm in Israel. I just went to the Kvarim. I went to the Ari. I went to the Rashbi. I davened. I'm like, Hashem's going to help me in this path. I'm just going to send out the flyer, and Hashem's going to help me with it. And I sent out the flyer. I'm like, before I go to sleep, I'm sending it to 25 people. I don't care if it's not perfect. I'm just sending it. So I sent it to you, one of them. 10 minutes later, you messaged me. You said, I'd be happy to talk about it, but you got to get on a podcast. So I'm like, there you go.
Right. I wouldn't.
No, I know.
Yeah.
But my point is that like I was just doing what I
Right,
felt was
understood.
right, and
Yes.
again the world was talking to me. So that's it. All came full circle about your name came to me, and now we're here. So
Right. Yeah, and I when you talk about Kfarim and everything else, there is a much longer mission going on here. Meaning, there's a connection to the past. There's something happening in these moments that could, I don't know, rectify or thousands of years essentially
Right.
of suffering. There is moments happening now that are, for whatever reason, very crucial, very important. And I guess every moment in history, every moment before then led up to this exact moment. But here we are now having this conversation. I think it's an important one. It definitely renewed my own kind of seriousness around this issue. And maybe I should, I guess, the devil's like tricky. So one of the ways one of the excuses I gave myself to take a little bit of a backseat on this issue, like not be as outspoken around child sex abuse as I once was. Like it was where I started speaking. That was the first, and at that point in time, it was a big deal for me to talk. To this day, I haven't met anyone with a bigger fear of public speaking than I had before I started speaking. It was massive. And eventually I started speaking, and the first, what was it that pushed me, that said, I must speak out, was the topic of child sex abuse. Understanding that how I was impacted by it, understanding that there's a way out of it. We're not bound to it, understanding that it happens to tons of people. I felt like I absolutely must talk about the subject. And one thing led to another, and here we are today. But shortly after talking about it, I got into recovery from addiction. And as you get into recovery from addiction, especially sexual addiction and everything else, so there's some understanding more of the sexual, kind of craziness in our own life. Saying like, oh my goodness, like I was addicted to this, I was addicted to that, in different ways. And what I told myself was that as I healed some of my own self-judgment around my own sexuality, I didn't have as much extreme judgment for, others who did what they did. I was able to see it with more neutrality. But now in talking to you, and I actually shared this with someone recently, and he's like, is that so? Like, is that a good thing? Is that a good thing to view it with more neutrality? Maybe it needs a war. And he questioned me on it, and I wasn't sure, but I said, hey, I just know that a lot of the people who were on the front lines of this fight were dealing with their own, sexual issues, and maybe some of the rage against the world and others was rage inward at our own inability to control our sexual appetites, even though it took on a very different face, certainly. right? Strip clubs or porn or whatever else. But that conversation, that question, and then this conversation again now, kind of, I feel like that's the message, is that no, this is a big issue, and it's affecting many people, and we think we did something about it. We haven't.
And it's not just affecting them, it's affecting their children.
Yeah, it's affecting
their whole
massively.
lives.
Then, like you mentioned, as people are abused, often their children get abused, and even if not, and it impacts their relationships. I've always said, if you want to know how sexual abuse affects someone, don't ask the survivor. Don't. Ask their spouse. They're the ones having sex with them or not having sex with them. They'll know this, they'll understand where that's gone off the rails. So, okay. We're here now.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Happened. Thank you for renewing my commitment to this fight against child sex abuse and giving more exposure to this cause. I'm sure you'll hear from many people.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming. And good luck with whatever you're doing at Tikkun. I hope you're able to help many people, and I hope the blessing for Hatzlacha that was communicated to you, you see in real life, because it definitely seems like you're doing this you're doing this from a genuine path to heal yourself and heal others and to bring this message to the wider world.
Thank you.